A bar was for sale in Port Huron in 1971. I wanted to make a little more money than I was making in the retail business, so I bought the Satellite Bar in 1971. So just started a different life for me entirely, completely different life for me and my family at the time. There used to be a character named Willie the Actor Sutton in the 50s that was in and out of prison, and he robbed banks. And they asked him, "Why do you rob banks?" He says, "Because that's where the money is." And that was his famous statement. But I bought a bar because it had a good income report, and I wanted to make more money. And it was in my hometown. Satellite was in an old section of town. It's long since been torn out. Somebody had gone in and put a little stage in it, and at some point they took another building next to it, expanded it, and it was already in existence with entertainment and what wasn't heavy rock, but strong dance music. Top 40 was the genre attached to it. The bands that could play them were enjoyed by the public more. So there were some interesting things going on, and changes, mind you, by 1971. Heavier rock and more acid-oriented rock was coming in, but we were in the middle of the road of top 40s yet. And I noticed that you had an album cover of Lafayette and the LeSabres. They were the biggest draw in that place when I bought it. And Lafayette Yarborough was a great fun guy to work with, and really knew the business, and Southern boy. I think he came up from Alabama or someplace. And I'm not sure how much music training he had as far as reading music, but he sure knew how to play it, and he could remember everything. So that was the kind of thing I got into. And it was rowdy. It was rowdy. 50% of the business was Canadian. It was big at that time, maybe 60%. And Canadians are fun. A little rowdy too, but they were fun. Just very interesting. It was a nice mixture at that time. And all the years I was in the business, which would be 11 years, very few bands did I ever bring in. You could count them on your hand that I hadn't seen personally playing. And I try to evaluate them as to what I thought would suit the venue and people would like. Of course, Bob Seger came in. Teagarden and Van Winkle, early on, they were just about ready to split, I think, but they came in a couple of times, Detroit bands, and they were very good. And they were more the new rock. And Bob Seger was old rock and roll, old-fashioned rock and roll, but he was new rock, I mean. And so when he came in, it was different, actually. He was having a tough time. He had had a hit or two and then went into a slump. And the biggest crowds to see him were in Canada. So I booked him on one trip on his way to Canada. I think I paid for the gas. There were other places that had bands, too. A couple of competitors had bands, and we were looking at the same groups. I had mostly Detroit guys, but there were locals in and out of my place, too. And I liked them because it was just easier to work with them. Great local musicians here. For some reason, it's like the Swampers in Alabama, and just that maybe that culture. If I can, I don't know. I can't expound on it, but because I don't know a lot about it. But Port Huron is like, it makes me think of what I've read and heard about the Swampers. I closed it on New Year's Eve of 1974, and I had bought the Elks Club building that was empty. I had borrowed the money. Thankfully, the bank had faith and loaned us the money to remodel the Elks building, which was built in 1911 in a huge building, real big, huge ballroom already in it. So that opened in 75, in March, I think it was, of 75. We worked hard. Of course, I had 3.5 floors. And the big floor where the Elks had their ceremonies and dances and so on was what we used for Boardwalk and Park Place. And we had one in the basement called Free Parking. And it was pool tables and so on. Never did really exceptionally well, but the best we did was when I was able to get bluegrass music. And I heard some, and I thought, that's fun. And I had some folk singers, too, for a long time. And it attracted, kind of like, folk singers were like a cult. Not the bad side of it, the fun side of it, you know. And there was still a place for folk music at the time. But then we found bluegrass. And bluegrass is just all energy and all fun. A picture of those guys playing on a New Year's Eve party. We had New Year's Eve upstairs and New Year's Eve downstairs. People were we were the working, I was working stiff when I went downstairs, and I was a 3-piece polyester suit stiff when I worked upstairs. That was a place I fell in love with in Fort Lauderdale, Pete and Lenny's, that was the name of it. And they had a lit dance floor. And it was all the hot rage in Fort Lauderdale, which moves from this venue to the next quickly. But it was such a cool concept, and it changed the whole lighting in the place. You could spend a lot of money on ambient lighting, but a lit dance floor put that lighting everywhere, and it lit the people up if it was the right colors. And I noticed that, and so I went to 2 or 3 more, and said, "This is really cool. This is new. Let's go for it." It was interesting. I had it done by a Catholic nun. I got the design. Dave Thompson and I saw a design off of, I forget what, maybe stained glass something, and we plagiarized the design and cut pieces of it out and put different parts of it on this plexiglass floor, which we built. We designed it, built it so it would hold up to dance floor, and it was 20 by 20. It had this huge floral arrangement. It was painted by a Catholic nun, Sister Eileen, from St. Joseph Convent and School. And she always had one or two troubled young men in tow, and she had this kid help her with it. And when we started, we had too much light under it, in fact. We had to try to reduce the light. We opened Boardwalk with a new kind of music. The hot song was Do the Hustle in New York. Nobody had even ever heard of it in Port Huron, and it was completely new. And I had had so much trouble with rowdiness in the old rock and roll, because rock and roll had kind of degenerated into heavy rock, acid rock, and beyond, heavy metal. And it was getting rowdy. And I didn't like that. It was no way to run an entertainment venue, and there were a lot of fights and drugs. And I said, I'm all done with that. You know, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to live that way, and I don't want to run that kind of operation. And I'd seen these things operate on the East Coast, so we gravitated, just migrated over to this newer kind of music. And I saw a band outside of Ann Arbor that was doing it. They were out of Chicago, dressed in polyester suits. And, the only guys other than that dressed in polyester suits were black bands in Detroit. We saw that, I saw that, and Do the Hustle, and several new songs running up and down the East Coast, and I said, this is fun, and it's clean. And so the first thing I decided was no blue jeans, no biker leathers, no crap. We're going to try to do this right. And business conditions were fairly good compared to today, and I was confident, and so we opened it with that kind of music, and it was successful. It didn't hurt that about a year later that Saturday Night Fever come along, and married women were insisting that their husbands take dance lessons and wear white belts, and so that filled up the room too. But that was a different kind of music, and fun. It was new and refreshing, and certainly fit the mold that I wanted. That no more violence and no more crap and no more carrying people out who were stoned. Bob Seger helped bring it down, actually. Bless his heart. He did. He all by himself. You know, I want to hear that old-fashioned rock and roll, and so, you know, bless his heart. He helped bring that down because people missed it, and I did too. You know, but I hung on quite a while. It was refreshing to get away from that, and it was hard for me to go back to it. But I did. I had so many bands, and I'd seen them all. Every last one of them I went to Detroit to see, or further. Just so interesting to see that change over time. And I wish I knew more about music, but I don't. The Globetrotters were having trouble because they were run by a management company, and they were on salary. The management company booked them all, and they were having a labor difficulty. And so, I mean, it was an entertainment troupe, you know, but good at what they did. And they were in Port Huron, and they decided they were going to go on strike. And it's a cheaper place to stay, I guess. And so they stayed, and it lasted, gosh, I don't know, maybe a month, 6 weeks. It was a long time. I remember the big guy was named Nate. I remember Nate would go up on stage and sing, and I liked it. And they were in the bar a lot. They had nothing else to do, right? And a lot of bars are, shall we say, on the conservative side around in a redneck town. But ours was never that way, and I didn't live that way. So, and I put them up in the Algonquin, and they loved it. They loved it. They could walk around downtown. The other thing they liked, and all these guys liked, was I always let them rehearse, full tilt, not in a garage, not in a little room. You know, if they had the stage, they could rehearse. They'd practice over and over and over till they get it right, which is what you got to do. And so I always let them rehearse. And when we went to Boardwalk, same thing. The top floor was only open at night, and so they could rehearse all day. So they used it to their advantage. And I remember Skip Van Winkle used it, and they just, you know, it's so much better when you got everything. You can turn it up and work on it and over and get it right. So I let them rehearse all the time, and they liked that. And I'm glad they could. You know, it worked out good. I'm not a musician. I don't know if you know that, but I can hardly read music, and I struggle with radio. But I liked their work, and I've always enjoyed it.